Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh with Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope everybody's doing well and feeling well. I'm getting over something, but I'm doing all right. I'm going to talk with you guys about some more developments in the tropics here. Believe it or not, we are still dealing with an active middle to latter part of the season here, especially over the open Atlantic, and some things we have to keep an eye on if you're on the East Coast. So let me share my screen with you and show you what we're looking at here in the next week. Of the three of these, only one of these currently is a named storm. That is Philippe, which is a tropical storm, and that is battling some wind shear. But models do continue Philippe on a more westerly path, which we do need to keep an eye on here in the northeastern Caribbean, the Bahamas, and maybe even the southeastern United States. We've got some time to watch it. Behind it, we're likely going to have another named storm here later this week, and the next name on that list would be Rina. And models do show more favorable weather for Rina to strengthen into a hurricane. The good news with that one is it does not look like the threat to land. It's likely going to take a recurve, likely saw with Nigel here last week. And then we do have to keep an eye on the East Coast. Maybe nothing tropical at this point, but models do indicate that off the East Coast, we are going to see low pressure trying to form again. And something we have to watch in the mid-Atlantic states with more rain and high surf expected here as we head into next week. And, there is an outside chance that something subtropical or even tropical may still try to form across this area, even though the models aren't indicating that. So while things have still been quiet in the Gulf and in the Caribbean, we are certainly not done yet with tropical season. And with fronts coming down off the East Coast into the Gulf, we do have to keep an eye on things for what I call maybe some home brew development for things that could develop closer to the coast. So let's break all that down for you right now. Just two storms to keep an eye on. Philippe, which is a tropical storm, and a disturbance behind it, AL91, which models show have a 60% chance of becoming a depression by the time we get to Thursday morning, and a 90% chance that we do have at least a tropical depression and probably a tropical storm before the end of this week or the weekend. And the next name on the list would be Rina. That would be our, I believe, 17th or 18th storm of the season. So my forecast was for 18 this year. I think we're going to end up a little bit on the low side, but nonetheless, it's still a decent forecast if you take a look at what's coming up here in the future. Here's a look from tropicaltidbits.com at our water vapor imagery, and I'm going to circle a few features for you. Let me just find that pen for you guys here. All right. And this is Tropical Storm Philippe over here, and you can see there is a trough off to the west of it, providing some wind shear to the southwest. That is keeping the storm from developing into anything stronger. It's going to struggle, but may still survive that wind shear. And then on the heels of Philippe over here, we have developing AL91, which looks like a bigger storm that has a bigger chance of making a larger impact over the central Atlantic, but not a threat to land. In fact, Philippe is probably going to come back in this direction as this trough lifts out to the north. But as high pressure builds to the east over here, that's going to create more of a steering wind for this system to come up in this direction. So we could talk about it all day, but it looks like it's going to be a fish storm and potentially a hurricane, but one that does not impact any significant land. Now, closer to home, we are keeping an eye on the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Not really for tropical development, but for some heavy rainfall. There is an upper level feature here that a couple of days ago the models tried to indicate something weak would try to form. That is not really happening, but we are still seeing moisture getting pulled northward out of the Western Caribbean into Florida and Cuba, the Caymans, and even Western Jamaica and the Western Bahamas. And with this upper low, we're going to continue to see a feed northward here. So a lot of significant rainfall is expected over the Western Caribbean and Florida. And we have not seen a lot of that this tropical season. So this is kind of a little bit unusual for this year, the El Nino that we're in, but not unusual this time of the year. In fact, we often see development in the tropics in this area as we head into October. I don't think that's the case with this system. I think we have too much wind shear, a lot of dry air back in here. But we still have the moisture in place here for some heavy rainfall across this portion of the country and across the Caribbean islands as well. Pretty good shape here over the Eastern Caribbean, as it's been pretty much all summer and fall long here. Very dry air in place here over the Northeastern Caribbean. But keep an eye on Philippe, as I will show you some of the models are trying to maybe give this a spot to turn back towards the left and maybe get into this area here in the next week or so. Looking back at the U.S., we have a pretty intense upper level feature here moving through Iowa and Wisconsin. That is going to track east-southeastward into the Ohio Valley and produce some strong storms on the southern side of it, maybe a few tornadoes and certainly some hail and strong winds across this portion of the Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes. And I'm going to break that down towards the end of this video as we take a look at what could be a pretty impressive amount of wind aloft for this time of the year. Elsewhere, we do have a very strong feature moving through the northern Atlantic and surface low pressure here that's not tropical, expected to head towards Ireland and the UK. I believe there's even a name for that one, although we don't do the names here in the tropics, but a pretty significant storm that's expected to head in the general direction of the UK here by the end of the week. This is a look at wind shear. The reds indicate unfavorable wind shear, the greens favorable low wind shear, and the yellows moderate wind shear. And we can see here on the map, there's some pretty unfavorable wind shear in the face of Philippe, which is right here. You see Philippe is kind of heading in this direction where we've got a ribbon of very fast wind flow aloft out of the southwest. So the good news is that I don't think Philippe gets even close to hurricane strength. The bad news is that if it does survive this wind shear, there will be more favorable lower wind shear across this area to the north of the island. So that's something I'll be monitoring for you guys. Here's our next system, by the way, and you'll see the wind shear for that is actually going to be lower, so it does have a more favorable environment to develop here in a few days as it moves in this direction. Great news over the eastern Gulf and over the northwestern Caribbean. We have a lot of wind shear in place, 30 knots or more, even 40 knots. So whatever does try to form in here is just going to get blown off to the north and east and will not develop into anything tropical. So I know this is a little technical for a lot of you, but I think it's kind of easier to understand if you see the science behind things. So that's what we're taking a look at. Here's the infrared from the East Coast. You can see a lot of high clouds will stream into the Carolinas. We still have some rain in place over the mid-Atlantic Northeast here, kind of some squeezed moisture from the remains of what was Ophelia here over this boundary. And then you can see pretty quiet weather over the rest of the Western Atlantic. Bermuda in pretty good shape today. Really all of our attention gets focused on the Northwestern Caribbean this time of the year. And you can see a lot of thunderstorm development here over the Cayman Islands, off the coast of Honduras and Northeast Guatemala. It looks pretty impressive, but honestly, this is not going to develop into anything tropical. We've got our upper level feature in here. We have some heavier storms over Belize, some very heavy rain moving northward across the Florida Keys at this hour and heading towards Andros Island. So a lot of rain coming this way, but nothing that's going to organize into a tropical system, I believe. Although I would say don't ever count it out this time of the year. It just doesn't look very favorable. So if you are in South Florida, eventually Central Florida, you've got a lot of rain coming here over the next few days. I know some of that rain is certainly needed, but it could be a lot in just a short amount of time. In the Central Atlantic, we see Philippe and we see our next invest. A lot of thunderstorm activity, but also a lot of wind shear here. So Philippe, we do have to keep an eye on. If it does weaken faster and survive, it's got an avenue to go more to the west, maybe getting closer to the Virgin Islands. Meanwhile, the system behind it will likely be Rina by the weekend. That has a better chance to develop, but it is not going to be a threat to land. Here's a look at the Eastern Atlantic. You can see the tropics are quieting down. A lot of wind shear here over the Cabo Verde Islands and then Western Africa. No big waves coming off. So once we get past this next one, I think we'll be in pretty good shape for a while. Here's a look at the future, and these are the ensembles from the European model. And I'm going to move things forward, and you can see really our only two features to keep an eye on, kind of going 1-2. Now you can see Philippe here does have an avenue to try to come back to the west, but it would be a very weak system, probably a depression or even a remnant low, as it maybe tracks closer to Bermuda towards Hispaniola and the Virgin Islands. The next system's got a better chance of strengthening into a hurricane, but it is going to be making more of a right turn, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And then we do have the potential to see lower pressure here off the east coast of the Carolinas here later next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday next week. But the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Caribbean, where we see all that thunderstorm development, we do not see anything tropically getting going. So, you know, this is not a terrible look for us, but we have to keep an eye on things, certainly on the East Coast, with lower pressure showing up on several of the ensembles in here. And then obviously we're going to keep an eye here on what could be Hurricane Rina. A couple of ensembles are very strong with this system. I don't know if that's necessarily the case here as waters are starting to cool down due to the fact that we've had so many storms here over the recent months. But we certainly could still have a hurricane across this area. Here's a look at the European ensemble control to show you where things are going to be very wet over the next 15 days. Very clear to kind of make out where our systems are going. This would be our future system, Rina. This would be Philippe over here. And you can see a lot of wetness over the central Atlantic. But when you take a look at the Caribbean and the Bahamas, things are actually on the dry side compared to average. If you look at the African coast, where the main development region is, things are below average. So this gives us a good signal that we are pretty much done after this next system, Rina, with tropical waves coming off and surviving a very dry looking pattern here in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, the Western Gulf is very dry as well. But if you look at Florida, the Northwestern Caribbean, and the East Coast, we remain on the very wet side with potentially over 5 or more inches of rain above the average. Here's a look at the eastern United States to kind of show you guys what that looks like here. There we go. And you can see significant amounts of rain coming over the next 15 days over the Florida coastline. I'm sorry, it gets cut off over here. Eastern North Carolina, the Tidewater region, Mid-Atlantic, New Jersey, New York, Southern New England. This gives me a pretty good signal that we're going to be dealing with significant lowering of pressures here as fronts get kind of hung up here off the East Coast. And any one of these could certainly form a low pressure system, which maybe isn't going to be tropical, but maybe something of concern with the higher surf. We've seen a lot of coastal flooding over the Outer Banks recently, over the Chesapeake Bay, and certainly over New Jersey. And you need to keep an eye on things if you're in this area. While we may not see a named storm form in here, we will certainly see an increase in moisture, an increase in rainfall, and probably some wind as well. So that's what I'll be watching for you guys. The control, by the way, I'll show you kind of what it shows here. This is Philippe. This is our next system, probably Rina. Here's our big system heading into the UK here in the next couple of days. As you track these features, you can see that it tries to take Rina a little bit farther to the west, closer to the islands, which we do need to watch, but it pretty much kills Philippe off, which is a good thing at this point. You can see, though, it tries to redevelop Philippe here just north and east of the Bahamas, at least lower pressure, maybe not anything significantly organized, but something to keep an eye on here. And then as we head towards the later part of next week, we do have lower pressure here off the southeast coast. We do have Rina developing into at least a Category 1, maybe Category 2 hurricane, but turning away as high pressure off of the Nova Scotia coastline does deflect that system to the east. But you see that lower pressure here off the Carolina coast later next week. That's something we definitely need to keep an eye on. I don't think it's another Ophelia. I think it's just a non-tropical low, but we certainly need to keep an eye on that. And Rina could be a powerful storm in here, but not a threat to any land. So yeah, we definitely have something to watch here later next week. This is a system that could be in our hair for at least a week if this holds up. And the reason why, we've got a big area of high pressure building, and we have the trough action that we see here in the plains lifting north and east, and that opens up an avenue for the East Coast to potentially see a system here in the next 14, 15 days or so. Again, a little bit too far out to make any specific forecasts. The European operational only goes 10 days out. You can see, though, it is farther south and west here with very weak Philippe, and it's a little farther south and west with Rina, but it does take Rina and turn it to the north and east. That's a little closer than we like to see here to the islands, but it does keep that track off to your north and east in a week. And it also shows the remains of Philippe trying to make a comeback over here to the east of Florida. Now let's take a look at the GFS. It looks a little bit different, but shows a similar pattern here. You can see it takes Philippe much farther to the right and kind of kills it off southeast of Bermuda here by the weekend. And then tries to bring it back down towards Puerto Rico as a very weak low pressure early next week. You can see it's also got a very powerful Rina. It would have a Category 3 hurricane. So we may still have a major hurricane as we get into early October here, but that is not a threat to land. Now you can see it kills Philippe, and it actually forms a new low pressure system here with our weakened boundary here somewhere over the southeast just offshore here later next week. So this is not Philippe, it's actually a new low pressure system, and I think that's actually going to be more likely that we see a new low forming rather than see the remains of Philippe try to make a comeback. But we do need to watch both because pressures are certainly low in here and rainfall amounts are higher. So no matter what evolves out of this pattern, we see a wetter pattern off the East Coast. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you're in the Gulf states and in the Western Caribbean, though, this is some pretty good news for you. You may see a weaker low pressure system try to form in here, but it doesn't look like something that's going to do very well due to the fact that we have higher wind shear and a lot of dry air off the Texas coastline. So this is not a terrible look for the Gulf states, but on the East Coast, it is a concerning look. And in the Northeastern Islands here, it's something we need to watch as well. And the Canadian model, which loves to spin up tropical cyclones this time of the year, you can see it's still holding on to Philippe. It's got Rina becoming the stronger system by Thursday night and Friday. And then it's got low pressure forming later in the weekend east of the Outer Banks and spinning around for several days. You can see it's got all three on the map, and that's kind of what I showed you guys with my graphic here earlier. While I don't think Philippe is going to be the stronger of the storms, I think this newer low could be, and Rina is not going to be a threat to land because it's already turning away from Bermuda. This takes Philippe closer to Bermuda, by the way, as a very weak system, but certainly that could produce some heavy rain with it. So things are still pretty active here, even in the Western Atlantic, Western and Central Atlantic, as we head into the early part of October, and pressures are on the lower side as well in the Southern Gulf. So we are definitely not done with tropical rains here in Florida or on the East Coast. We just may be done with stronger storms across this area. So let's take a look at our current storms. This is Philippe, tropical storm with 50-mile-per-hour winds. You can see it's exposed where all of the moisture and all the thunderstorms are off to the east of the center. That is due to southwesterly wind shear. The low pressure system is actually over here with no thunderstorms under it, but very strong storms over to the eastern side of the storm. That is indicative of a tropical storm that is struggling but still maintaining its own. And I don't think it's going to be making a comeback anytime soon. The Hurricane Center is trending more to the left, but does kill it off to a remnant low over the weekend. But notice how the Virgin Islands and just north and east of Puerto Rico, the northern Leeward Islands are kind of on the western side of the cone of uncertainty. So even though this system's going to be much weaker by the time it maybe gets closer, it is something we need to keep an eye on here towards the second part of the weekend. Here's a look at our tropical models from Philippe, and we're seeing fewer of them turning Philippe away, more showing it more moving to the northwest or even more to the west or west-southwest. And you can see the Ensemble solutions are trending more in that general direction, but it would be a much weaker system. It could get closer to Puerto Rico or the U.S. or even British Virgin Islands, so keep an eye on that. But it may also be a dissipating system at that point. You can see wind speeds on the tropical models. Still a few show strengthening to a hurricane. If it survives a wind shear, that would not be until Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know if that's going to happen. I tend to think tropical storm is more likely. It may even get down to a depression over the weekend and try to make a comeback to a storm by the time we get into next week. The HAFS model says somehow it's going to survive the wind shear here. It will weaken some over the next couple of days, but then try to re-strengthen on Wednesday and may get close to hurricane strength by Thursday. So it does show Philippe surviving, even though it's clearly a wind-sheared storm here with all the action here on the north and east side, kind of like a mullet where everything's in the back, not a whole lot in the front here. So I'm trying to make some humor here. Just bear with me. But here's Philippe, and you can see it's still holding on as a hurricane over the weekend. So, and in fact, it's actually getting a little bit closer to the islands than we would like to see. Here's a look at our pressures, and it's we got to keep an eye on it if we're in the Leeward Islands, if the HAFS is right. I think this is an outlier, though, so I'm not forecasting it at this point, but notice that bend back to the south and west here as the wind shear lets up and high pressure builds into the north. That is something we need to keep an eye on in the islands. I'm not explicitly forecasting that, but just giving you guys kind of a heads up if you're in that area. Our next system is a big blob, a big mess, but it is big. And eventually, as we see a core forming, we will likely see a tropical system form. Rina is the next name on the list. You will see that system is not going to be a threat to land. Everything shows it turning to the right, staying well east of Bermuda, but also potentially a powerful storm system. Now, the European says it could get a little bit closer to the islands, but not if Philippe is there. There's got to be space between these two. They're not going to form and combine into one system. More than likely, this would kill Philippe. But if Philippe gets farther west, then there could be enough spacing where we do have two named storms on the map next week. And you can see there's a good chance this will strengthen to a tropical storm by the end of the week and potentially a hurricane over the weekend. So that's what I'm going to watch for you guys here in the tropics. So kind of just some take-home points at this point. We're not done on the East Coast. We've got more rain coming here next week. Philippe is going to struggle, but there are models that show it surviving and maybe threatening the Leeward, Virgin, and Puerto Rico islands here next week, maybe. And then Rina, likely a hurricane, but no threat to land, and maybe even a major hurricane. Elsewhere, we do have a severe weather setup coming over the next couple of days. You'll see a marginal risk for severe weather here, mainly over the Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes over the next couple of days, also over the Southwest. And it'll be unsettled in the Pacific Northwest. Here's a look, though, at the Midwest, because I think that's where we have to keep our closest eye on things over the next couple of days. And you can see we've got a marginal risk around Chicago, across eastern Iowa, down to the Ohio River, all the way down to near Cincinnati. Small chance, 2% chance for tornadoes across northern Illinois, northwest Indiana, far eastern Iowa. A larger chance for some stronger winds and hail later today into tonight, all the way down to the Ohio River. And taking a look at tomorrow, we see still a chance for storms around Chicago, but the threat for severe weather does drop farther south and east into southeastern Indiana, northern and eastern Kentucky, middle Tennessee, and southwestern Ohio, and mainly a chance for wind and hail that could be severe. As we head into the day on Thursday, we see a slight, or I say marginal, but it's kind of a slight risk for severe storms around Indianapolis, Columbus, northern and eastern Kentucky, even over towards Huntington, West Virginia, maybe even close to Parkersburg and Point Pleasant here for potentially some hail as we have our storm system dropping off to the south and east. And you can see why. We've got this upper level low that's digging down into Iowa this afternoon. This is about 5 p.m. and then cutting into Illinois here. And you can see a piece of energy swinging east tomorrow over the Ohio River Valley and then continuing eastward into Ohio and western PA and then weakening by tomorrow night. And then another piece of energy rotates along the base of this trough here on Thursday afternoon and evening. And that could provide some severe weather into the eastern Ohio and Tennessee valleys by the time we get into Thursday afternoon and Thursday night. Supercell composite, just to give you guys an idea of where we could see some supercell storms. I don't know necessarily about Missouri, but I guess there is a chance. More likely it's going to be over Illinois here this afternoon into early tonight. Tomorrow we see that chance growing across Kentucky, across downstate Illinois, eastern Indiana, and southwestern Ohio. And then as we get into Thursday, we start to see things building north and east. The model only goes to about 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central Thursday. But we have to keep an eye on things across the eastern Ohio Valley states, eastern Tennessee Valley states as well. The NAM model shows a couple of stronger storms around Chicago here right on through about lunchtime, and then we keep an eye on storms that develop here this afternoon into this evening. This is about 11 o'clock tonight Central around St. Louis, as well as around Indianapolis and across southern parts of Illinois. As we head into tomorrow, things rotate south and east. We see stronger storms around Lexington, Cincinnati, and Covington, as well as towards Dayton and maybe into Columbus here later in the afternoon tomorrow. We kind of see two waves forming here. We keep an eye on the tail end of things here around Hopkinsville and Bowling Green early tomorrow night for maybe some hailers, and even downstate Illinois and over central Missouri here later tomorrow night. Then as we head into the day on Thursday, this front arcs eastward. Things kind of wane as we get into the later morning hours, but I think we'll see more development here in the afternoon across the eastern Ohio Valley. Winds could be pretty gusty across this area as well. As you can see, it's going to be windy across Pennsylvania today, and then as we head into the afternoon into tonight, locally strong storms, which could produce some powerful wind gusts here over downstate Illinois, gusts over 40 miles per hour this afternoon into this evening, and then tomorrow across parts of Ohio, 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts are possible. And across the Tennessee Valley here tomorrow night, we could see some stronger wind gusts as well. So keep an eye on that as well. Isolated power outages in here due to the stronger winds and the gustier showers and storms. Finally, let's look at Florida, because you're going to be pretty wet in Florida here over the next several days along the Gulf Coast. We're going to see heavier showers and storms this morning, then more storms building over the peninsula here this afternoon, lasting into tonight. The I-4 corridor could get rocked with some heavy rain here this evening. More storms coming out of the Gulf here tomorrow morning, affecting the Western Peninsula and the Gulf Coast states tomorrow afternoon, then building north and east. And we're going to wash, rinse, and repeat for Thursday with a lot more action coming in from the south and west. In fact, rain totals over the next few days could be pretty significant here. If you look at Orlando to Tampa, we could see some places picking up 6 or 7 inches of rain locally, and down around Apalachicola, potentially 7 to 8 inches of rain here across the western Big Bend. So not everybody's going to see extreme amounts of rain, but somebody will in this area. It could be anywhere on the western and central panhandle, as well as over the northern and central peninsula. So keep an eye on that over the next couple of days. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you for your patience as I've been dealing with some of the crud, but I'm getting a lot better. I thank you for your support. If you are a subscriber, I really appreciate it. Maybe you want to consider becoming a member. You can do that at $9.99 a month. That helps support me and my reach. If you are a first-time guest, then of course I would appreciate it if you would subscribe here, as I'll have mainly daily videos for you all as well. But I thank you all so much, and I give all the glory to God, who gives me the courage and the strength to do this every day. I feel like it's my calling to share the weather with you, but my firm foundation is in God, and He gives me the strength to do this. He has created all of us, and he has given us the opportunity to live eternally with Jesus, his son, in heaven. Leviticus 26, 1 through 4 talks about God's promises here, also potentially God's curses if you don't believe in him. He says, "Ye shall make you no idols nor graven image, neither rear you up a standing image, neither shall ye set up any image of stone in your land to bow down unto it, for I am the Lord your God. Ye shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If ye walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit." Sorry for the tongue twister there, but the Lord promises Israel that if you guys follow me and you don't follow idols and worldly items, then I'm going to bless you with the rain that you need and the fruit that you would like to have a fruitful life. Funny that we talk about rain, but I know a lot of folks have been dealing with drought. But if you stay encouraged by the Lord's word, if you stay in the word, if you share with other people, then God will bless you in many ways. That's basically what's being said here in Leviticus. And I've seen it just in my channel in 10 months, just staying true to God here. It's allowed me to grow my reach. I appreciate all you that follow me. I know not all of you are believers, and I'm not going to judge you, of course. I was not a believer until about 10 years ago, but I know staying honest to myself and staying true in the word has helped me to bless you all. And I am happy to pray for you with whatever you're going through in your life. I would love for you to be blessed like I've been blessed. I really feel like every day is a blessing, especially those of you that are older. You can certainly vouch for that. But knowing that following the Lord and, putting all of my strength in him and not in myself is what's allowed me to bless you. And I really, really do believe that God is a great God and that he can bless all of us in many ways. So I'm happy to pray for you, and I'd love it if you could pray over me. Thank you for being patient with me as I get over the crud. I feel a lot better today, and I will be back in the morning. God bless you. See you then.